Hello, my name is Tim Eigo. I'm the editor of Arizona Attorney Magazine. Welcome to my conversation with Patricia Lee Refo, president of the American Bar Association, the largest voluntary association of attorneys and legal professionals in the world. She took office on August 4th, 2020, at the end of the ABA's virtual annual meeting. Here in Arizona, Trish is also well known as a partner and litigator at Snell Wilmer, as a lawyer leader, and as a friend. Trish, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be with you.
It's such a pleasure to see you and talk to you today. You're midway through your year, almost midway through your year. It's probably the time has flown as president. Are you exhausted yet? Are you loving every minute? A little of both?
A little of both, I think, is the right way to put it. So we're, don't age me too much. We're about a third of the way through.
Okay.
Toward the middle here of December. And, it's exciting. Every day is different. And we've been busy, frankly, reinventing the office of the president of the American Bar Association in the midst of a pandemic.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more about that, but let me start by asking, what does your, congratulations on your elevation to the position.
Thank you.
In Arizona and across the country, we're all very happy that you're in the job. What does your service to the ABA and its members mean to you?
I've been involved in the ABA since I was a young lawyer, and I got involved because the partner at the firm I was in then in Chicago told me I needed to join the ABA because that's what lawyers did. And so I did, and I got involved, and I kept volunteering to do more like any good bar junkie. And I got increasing levels of responsibility. And as a consequence, I not only made myself, I think, a better lawyer by being involved in the ABA, but I networked with lawyers from across the country and indeed across the world who have also helped me to be a better lawyer. And I have been able to play a role in forming policy and working on bigger issues in the legal profession that I care about and that I think are important. So it's been an enormous piece of my professional life, and I would argue of my professional success as well.
That's excellent. Trish, let's think back to August when you were sworn in as the ABA's, I'm looking at my notes here, 144th president. Is that right? My goodness.
That's
and you're
right.
the first to be sworn in virtually, as I guess that's the case. So right here, I think we have an image of you getting sworn in. Is this the actual swearing in, or was this a recreation?
That is the actual swearing in.
That's excellent. And here you are, Judge Mary Schroeder is doing the honors.
Yes.
And you were at the Sandra Day O'Connor House in Tempe. Tell us, why did you choose to do it there? And can you describe the moment for us?
Well, normally the swearing in of the ABA president is done in a big giant ballroom in some wonderful hotel somewhere. And while obviously it's lovely and it's in front of the entire House of Delegates, when doing it virtually gave us the opportunity to do something completely different. And as a woman lawyer, I'm the 10th woman president of the ABA. And particularly with the gift of Judge Mary Schroeder swearing me in. We talked about it, she and I, and we couldn't think of a cooler place to do it than the O'Connor House, right? This is the home that Sandra and John O'Connor built themselves years and years ago, and that now sits on the grounds of the Arizona Historical Society. So it was an homage, of course, to the incomparable Justice O'Connor, but also a way to celebrate Arizona's moment, right? She's the biggest voice we have on the national legal stage, and certainly Mary Schroeder is another major Arizona voice on the national legal and judicial stage. So it all came together, and it was really quite wonderful to have the opportunity to be sworn in such a special place.
I'd agree. And Arizona's lawyers were so happy that you would showcase the person of Sandra Day O'Connor and this great state so well. So thank you for that. You
Well,
also had
we've only had 2 Arizona presidents in 144 years here in Arizona. So I guess the answer is we get one every 72 years, whether we need it or not, right?
more Arizona, please. That's great. And you also had to address the organization, and you probably have to do this a lot this year via video. And here we have you. I'm guessing that were you actually at Snell when you were?
I was. This is in our major
great.
conference room at Snell and Wilmer, and the ABA shipped me the flag and shipped me the signage so that we could make it look a little more official. But yeah, it was in our home at Snell.
That's great. And I imagine you just keep the flag and the signage there because you have other presentations you have to do, or no?
I have not been going into the office much at all. I go in every once in a while, particularly when the internet fails at home. But I've mostly been working from home. And when I referenced reinventing the office of the ABA president, that's a big piece of it. Sort of running the American Bar Association from my house was not exactly what I had expected the year to entail.
I bet. So in fact, I mean, in any normal year, if there is such a thing, running an organization, steering a ship that has 175,000 members, well, I can't even imagine what that's like, but doing it from your dining room table, this must have been an adjustment for all of the staff and the other ABA leaders to have you do this.
Well, absolutely. But you know what? Like our law firms, like our state bar here in Arizona, the ABA staff had to go virtual sort of overnight last March. We have staff in 2 major offices in Washington and in Chicago. And then we have a number of additional offices that are associated with some of our important pro bono and public service projects, and also staff overseas working on our rule of law initiatives. All of that had to go remote literally overnight, and that included rethinking how the office of the president works. Obviously, my predecessor, Judy Perry Martinez from New Orleans, began that process because she was working from home as ABA president for the last months of her term. But by the time I took office in August, we sort of had it a little bit figured out, and we were able sort of seamlessly to move the ABA office of the president into a completely virtual role. And it's been interesting, Tim, because in the old days, the ABA president got on airplanes and flew around the world. I was told coming into this job that I should probably expect as much as 300 nights this year to have my head sleeping on a hotel pillow. Well, not so much. I haven't slept on a hotel pillow once yet. And so what we've learned to do is project the office through virtual platforms like this one. And it turns out that you can get in front of a whole lot more people by staying still than you can by flying around and visiting places in person. So I would argue we've actually enhanced the voice of the ABA president by getting sort of locked up here versus running around the globe and spending all of that time in travel. I mean, I had a day a couple weeks ago where I started the day at a program in Paris for international bar leaders. I went from there to the Harvard Law School where I taught a class. I went from there to the State Bar Convention for Connecticut. And from there to, as I recall, another CLE that was based out of New York. And I did all of that, not only in one day, but without leaving my house.
Wow, that's remarkable. Well, Trish, I completely agree with you. I mean, I know that as we eventually get a vaccine and come out of this, we're going to be meeting all in person again. But I hope that's a lesson that we all take to heart, that we should be doing both, because you really are reaching far more people. So
no, I think that's true. And I think, all bar associations are going to have to take a lesson from this remote environment, because the likelihood that people are in the same numbers as before, going to want to hop on airplanes and fly places to attend in-person meetings, I think is small. I mean, I think we've discovered that some of the work that we do can be done and probably should be done remotely to both save expenses and conserve time, and to allow people who don't choose to spend the money or the time to continue to participate in what bar associations do.
Agreed. That's wonderful. And in fact, what we're seeing is that more people farther down in the organization tree are able to attend something that they never could have traveled to. So that's great. So in a moment, I'd like to ask you some specific questions about what's going on at the ABA, some initiatives you're instrumental in. But if you could describe for me, and maybe you did a little bit already, but what is your best week as the ABA's top leader look like? What does a great day for you look like? Is like the day where you're in Connecticut and Paris? Is that one of them?
Well, if we're talking about Paris, it would always be better to be there in person. But no, the great day is a day when I have the opportunity to get in front of groups of passionate lawyers and sometimes non-lawyers to talk about the issues that really, really matter. Things like, how are we as a profession going to get through this pandemic? How are we going to adapt to all of the changes that have been wrought on what we do and how we do it? How are our courts going to remake justice in a post-pandemic world? Because really, it seems to me that our challenge is, at the end of the day, to have a better system of justice after this pandemic than we did before. Because if we can't do that, then I would argue we've really failed. So the opportunity in a day to work on those issues with other lawyers and judges and law professors and other stakeholders in the legal community who care about those issues, that makes a great day.
That's terrific. Appreciate that. So we decided to speak with you, not back in August when you first became president, but a few months in, thinking we'd have a few more things to discuss. And of course, that's often the case, isn't it? So recently, the ABA Standing Committee on the Federal Judiciary got some press for deeming Amy Coney Barrett well qualified to serve on the Supreme Court. I think we have a picture here of her with her infamous blank notepad. I won't ask your thoughts on that result. I know that was the work of the Standing Committee. But I am curious about your thoughts on this. During the Trump administration, many people, many observers may even have forgotten that the ABA assesses judicial candidates and has for years, given that this White House has so routinely ignored the analysis you've done. Why is that work still important to the ABA and to the profession?
Well, I'm going to say, I guess, first that I'm not sure I agree with the premise that our analysis was ignored. So what the difference for the Trump administration and one prior administration in the last 69 years, I want to say, that the Federal Judiciary Committee has been working. The difference in the Trump administration and the George Bush administration is that they declined to permit us to advise the White House in advance of a public announcement of a nomination about our review of the candidate. And, you know, that's their prerogative to do that. And we certainly hope the Biden administration will return to what has been the traditional case, which is the opportunity for us to provide the input in quiet to the White House before they make a nomination. But the reason why the Judiciary Committee's work is so important is this. The American Bar Association is the only national voice of the legal profession in this country. And it is simply true that lawyers and judges talk to other lawyers and judges in confidence with greater candor than they do perhaps to the FBI agent or other federal officer knocking on the door, asking questions about a nominee. We do not evaluate politics or judicial ideology or judicial philosophy. Rather, the committee looks at integrity, judicial sort of qualifications, and matters of judicial integrity. And of the 370 some nominees that the Trump administration had put forward as of a couple weeks ago, which is the last time I had a number, there were only 10 whom the Federal Judiciary Committee deemed to be not qualified. So the vast majority of the Trump administration's judicial nominees were deemed to be either qualified or well qualified.
Well, I appreciate that clarification. And and we'll see what happens after January with the Biden-Harris administration, I suppose, and their approach. In early December, Trish, you spoke on a terrific panel of women Bar Association leaders. It was for the National Conference of Bar Presidents. Here's an image. And this is kind of a remarkable image, and I'm so happy. More of this, please. This is what we need. And when you spoke at that, besides being a terrific panel for a lot of reasons, I learned a few things about you that I didn't know. One is that at University of Michigan, you were planning to become a journalist. Is that right?
It's true.
And do you ever wonder what if?
Maybe I could have been, the editor of Arizona Attorney if I had gone that route.
Or even better. Well, Trish, these days, you need not limit yourself. You still may end up, you never know. You could be a ABC correspondent or something. But what were your interests back then in journalism? I'm curious.
Well, I think it's partly wanting to be involved in the issues of the day, which I get to do as a lawyer, right? Wanting to be an active, engaged citizen, wanting to have a profession that allowed me to work on and delve into truth. And that's kind of, a bit of what I get to do as a lawyer. So I actually think there are some similarities between being a journalist and being a lawyer. I hope I bring healthy skepticism, just as I would as a journalist, to my work as a lawyer. I don't take everything at face value. So I actually, like I said, think there's some overlap between the two, but I'm glad that I wound up being a lawyer and not a journalist.
Well, you're still good people, Trish, so we appreciate that. And I think you're right that there's a lot of corollaries between the professions. And as journalists, we look back and we appreciate all lawyers have done, but at the same time, journalists are happy to be mentioned in the Bill of Rights. So there's that too. So, and then also you started at Jenner and Block in Chicago as a new lawyer. Is that right? And when I looked at the time you were there, I was struck that we shared a city. This is completely off topic, but my then fiance and now wife and I lived in Chicago at the same time. I worked downtown at law firms as a proofreader before I went to law school at Merrill Brown and Platt and then McDermott Willett Emery. And I can't believe we were there at the same time. We were there about 86 to 90.
That's too funny. Well, maybe our paths crossed and we just didn't know it then.
That's absolutely right. So do you ever, you're in Chicago pretty often, except for this year with the ABA. Do you miss Chicago? Do you miss living there?
It's a great city. It's a great city. And it's so different from Phoenix. The reason that I got to Phoenix is because of the American Bar Association, because I met my husband at an ABA meeting. which we always joke is either really sweet or kind of sad, depending on how you think about it.
A little of both.
But my husband, Don Bivens, was a lawyer here in Phoenix and very active in the ABA, and we met at an ABA meeting. And so over time, as we began dating, it became clear that if we were going to do this, we were going to do it in Phoenix. If we were going to get married, it would require me to move because his kids, his two daughters, were in Phoenix at the time. And so that settled the question of where. And my colleagues at Jenner, my partners, then literally had like group lunches where they interviewed Don to determine whether this was going to be allowed to happen. And I say that only a little tongue in cheek, but the ABA is also responsible for bringing me my husband and bringing me to Phoenix. So back to why is the ABA important in my life? There are two more reasons.
That's great. And Trish, you've spoken about Jenner Block with a lot of fondness. You still have a warm place in your heart for them. What are a few things that the lawyers there, your colleagues there, taught you about being a lawyer?
You know, they truly raised me up as a lawyer. They taught me the responsibilities associated with being a lawyer, and they taught me the importance of both public service and pro bono work. And the power of the organized bar, and taught me that each of us has a responsibility to give back to one or all of those, to our profession, to our communities, and to those who can't afford legal services. And I've been blessed in my career to work at two law firms, now Snell Wilmer, who share those values and live them out every day. And that's just the essence, I think, of being a good lawyer, is being part of the organized bar, giving back to your community, and doing important pro bono work as well.
Oh, it's wonderful. So I'd like to go back for a moment to that panel you were on with the Women Bar Association leaders. And I'm wondering, as you think about this challenge the profession has, how do we create a pipeline of leaders to help the profession improve? And do you think we're succeeding at it?
Yes, we're succeeding at it, and yes, there's a lot more work to do, right? Both things are true. One thing that I said at the panel that you're talking about, Tim, that is really true is I'm the 10th woman president of the American Bar Association. And on the one hand, you can say, well, 10 out of 144, really? On the other hand, you can say that those 10 have all served during my career at the bar. And I am so privileged that every single one of the 9 women who preceded me in this position has personally mentored me, personally helped me, and raised me up as a leader in the American Bar Association, and is there for me now. And I talk to them regularly as I call and ask questions and seek advice. So we are making progress in diversifying the organized bar and the leadership of the organized bar. We're doing better with respect to lawyers of color as well, but we still haven't gone far enough. And so the pipeline programs that we do at the state, at the local, and at the national level to raise up leaders in the bar remain deeply important. And in fact, tomorrow is the beginning of the Collaborative Bar Leadership Academy, which the ABA and others founded precisely for the purpose of giving young, diverse bar leaders training and paths to advance in their bar work and move forward in the leadership of our profession.
That's great. So Trish, I noticed, well, actually, let me jump in. I'd like to get to a few of the topics that are probably occupying a lot of your time these days. In your opening remarks as ABA president, back in August, you discussed the two pandemics, the COVID-19 pandemic and racial injustice. So let's take the first. And let me ask you, what do you think can be done to help lawyers struggling amidst the pandemic? And I know the ABA is stepping up and trying to do some things.
We are, and I would put the piece that we're doing for lawyers is in a bucket that we call Practice Forward. It is a group of folks, volunteers and staff at the ABA who are collecting together and sort of coordinating ABA-wide all of the work being done around how is the practice of law changing because of this pandemic, and what do we need to do as lawyers and as judges to change our skill set and stay up with the moment with all of this change. So they have a website that is absolutely first rate, gathering together resources, materials, and information around all of the entities in the ABA who are working on issues about the change in the practice of law. And we talked before just about issues around being remote, how courts are managing remote proceedings, how are we doing jury trials, how is it safe to do jury trials, because there's a lot of experimentation going on in different parts of the country. That's sort of one set of stuff, but there are also issues like how do we mentor and raise up young lawyers in an environment in which we're not with them in the office physically. All of the unintended connections that we make with one another day in and day out, or used to when we were in the same offices, are gone now. So how do we recreate those interactions in a way that takes care of our younger lawyers? I mean, I know I learned a bunch about how to be a lawyer by sitting in the office of someone who was senior to me when I was first starting out and watching that person do his or her thing. Just watching them do a phone call, overhearing half of it or listening to it on the speakerphone. Well, it's harder to do that in a remote environment. So those kinds of issues as well. And there's also significant concern about making sure that we don't allow the pandemic to derail all of the important work that's being done around making sure that women and men and women of color are being properly advanced in our legal profession. There is some preliminary research indicating that women and particularly women of color are bearing a disproportionate share of the challenges associated with trying to practice law and live through a pandemic at the same time, in part because of childcare issues, elder care issues, and the like. So that too is something that our Practice Forward group is monitoring, looking at, and collecting information on.
Excellent. And I can tell you that, Trish, we have in our closing slide, we have a link, that very link up there, because I was just looking on the ABA website and I've seen what the ABA is doing and I was so impressed with it. That's the one link we put up. So we encourage people to take a look at that. So thank you. So let's turn to the second pandemic, as you so well put it. You've spoken about the organization's role in fostering racial justice, which came to a flashpoint with the homicide of, you can see George Floyd here, that's at the hands of the Minneapolis police. And this is actually a mural in Berlin, I believe. So the death of George Floyd has had international repercussions. And you could go on for an hour about this, but briefly, what can the ABA do about, racism in the profession, the courts, and the justice system?
I could go on for an hour and I won't, but so let me tell you briefly. First of all, the ABA only has 4 goals, and one of the 4 goals, so 25% of what we say we exist for, is to eliminate bias and enhance diversity in the profession and in the justice system. And I love that language because it doesn't say work to reduce bias. It says eliminate bias. It's a big, huge goal. So we have lots of work going on in an ordinary year on those issues. And of course, this is not an ordinary year. So in addition to all of the ongoing work, I have asked every single entity of the American Bar Association to put anti-racism and systemic racism issues at the very top of their priority list for this year. In addition to that, we have just launched a very exciting new project, which we're calling the ABA Legal Education Policing Practices Consortium. And we have at present 52 ABA accredited law schools from around the country who have agreed to participate in this consortium. And I'm proud to say that both of our law schools here in Arizona are participating. And we will be working together to address ways to modernize and improve policing practices, in part around racial equity sorts of issues. That's not the sole reason for the consortium, but it is certainly a major catalyst for the consortium. So there's a great deal of work to be done, and we're very much part of all of it that we can be part of.
That's excellent. Thank you. I'd like to turn to legal education for a moment. The ABA didn't just, recently this fall passed a resolution regarding bar exams that, I'm going to read this, called on states and territories to adopt emergency rules allowing alternatives to an in-person bar exam because of the physical dangers by virtue of the pandemic. And many states, to their credit, did exactly that. But there's still a lot of anger among this year's test takers. And it didn't take long for me to find a couple, Twitter handles that are talking about the bar exam, about the importance of looking at diploma privilege rather than a bar exam. So before we get to diploma privilege, do you believe that states and Supreme Courts that administer exams this year were insensitive to examinees' concerns?
Everyone was trying to be sensitive to the concerns of those who wanted to take the bar exam while at the same time doing what they felt was necessary to protect the public and to make sure that those who practice law are competent to do so. That's a challenge. And one of the things I think is important going forward is to actually look and see what happened as a consequence of the experiment that happened in front of our eyes last summer, and I fear will happen again this February with respect to the bar exam. We had states that have always had a bar exam who said, never mind, we're going to just do diploma privileges. We had states that had had a 2-day bar exam who said, never mind, we'll just do a 1-day bar exam. We had any number of different permutations around the bar exam, and they varied state to state. So this is a perfect opportunity for the academy to join together with the legal profession and figure out what are the results of what happened. We might learn some things about whether the bar exam actually does or doesn't protect the public from not good lawyers, right? There's always been a group that has argued that the bar exam is simply a protectionist measure to keep down competition. I don't happen to believe in that, but we can study the results of this most recent experience over time, and we can figure out whether there are, for example, more disciplinary complaints or more serious disciplinary complaints with respect to folks who practiced as a consequence of diploma privileges versus in the years before in their state taking a bar exam. So it's really important that we get the academy to study this, to give the profession some real answers about what the bar exam does and doesn't do.
I love that. So it's a little bit like, without intending it, we've become a laboratory for study to see what's going on, a laboratory for democracy.
That's exactly right. It is an experiment that is happening in front of our very eyes, and all we have to do is figure out what the result is and then take that data to actually inform decision making going forward.
So I agree that will be fascinating, and I hope states, since they have all the data, they will look at that and come to some thoughtful conclusions. There is a continuing debate, as you alluded to, about whether the test is really a test of practice readiness, or if it's doing a disservice to less traditional students, maybe students of color. But I guess that we'll have to see how that comes out in the wash. But in the bigger issue, do you worry about the depth of anger and disappointment felt by the profession's newest lawyers who are living through this right now?
Well, every state is different, is part of the challenge here, right? And so some states are not experiencing that, and other states are because of different decisions made. But the point in all of this, and the message that I have for younger lawyers, is that every single state Supreme Court that made a decision about what to do with the bar exam did so in good faith, making what they thought was the right decision. And you may disagree with it. I may disagree with it on an individual state by state level, but that is, and that's our right, is to disagree with the outcome, but not to question the good faith and the integrity of those who were making these deeply, deeply hard decisions in the face of an unprecedented pandemic, while at the same time trying to protect the public and fulfill our mission, their mission, to make sure that the lawyers in their state are adequately schooled and adequately prepared to go do the work that they're asked to do.
Thank you. So elsewhere, I believe even today, you're speaking about the crisis in evictions. Is that today? Oh my God, you're so busy.
It's most days, Tim.
That's true. But the crisis in evictions faced by hundreds of thousands of Americans. Here's a ridiculous question for you. What should be done going forward for all these individuals?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm not here to suggest that the ABA has every answer to this problem, because as you know, what's happened is that because of the economic crisis, there are, some say, as many as 30 million or more Americans who are at risk of eviction, either as a consequence of not being able to pay their rent or not being able to pay their mortgage. Not only is it a humanitarian crisis, but if all of those, there are moratoriums in place, both at the federal level and in a number of states, to prevent the evictions from going forward. If all of those are lifted at the same time, not only are you going to have a humanitarian crisis, you're going to have an enormous crisis in our courts, as they are faced with a tsunami of claims that they can't possibly adjudicate at one time. So we have been working very hard at the national level and are involved in the negotiations right now that are going on around the next stimulus package in Washington, proposing not just rent relief to prevent evictions, but also proposing mortgage relief for the property owners. Because for every person who doesn't pay his or her rent in a month, there's potentially a mom and pop landlord who isn't receiving the income they need in order to pay the mortgage and keep the property. So you can't approach this by just saying over and over again, stop evictions, because that doesn't stop the debts on the landlord. And 70% of the housing stock in this country that is deemed affordable is owned by, for lack of a better way to put it, mom and pop landlords, not by big giant conglomerates. So it's a deeply complex problem.
Yeah, that's for sure. Trish, I've presented you with a series of horrible challenges faced by the country right now, and I appreciate your take on them and the ABA's. But when I think about that avalanche, I go back to something, the way you ended your NCBP remarks on the panel with the other women leaders. And you touched on this, but I'd like you to explore a little more. You said, don't waste this hard moment we are in. We have an opportunity to be a change agent we will never have again. So I love that. And I was wondering, as a lawyer and a leader, what would you like to see change for those who come after you?
When I talked about the opportunity to be a change agent, what I was reaching for was that, especially as lawyers, we tend to be small c conservative, right? We are trained to do things the way they were done before, because that's how we know it's okay to do it this way. And that makes us change averse, I think. And so what I was trying to say is, when everything that we do has been upended, how we do things has been upended, our law schools, our courtrooms, our law firms, everything has been upended. Let's take this chance to shake things up a little bit. Let's figure out the pieces that haven't worked for a very long time and fix them. Let's find a way to provide better access to justice for those in our country who don't have it. Now is the moment for us to build back a justice system and a legal profession that is better designed to do what we're all here to do, which is to serve the needs of the American public whom we serve. And I think that's our challenge, and I'm excited for that reason to be in this role right now.
Wow, that's very energizing, Trish. And when I think about energizing, I also think back to the fact that you've mentioned John Bauma in the past, as who is the former managing partner of Snell Wilmer, as a mentor. I think this is a picture here. Here's John, of course, receiving an award from the then Chief Justice Scott Bales in Arizona. And John, of course, won so many awards and deserved so many accolades in his life. Any words about John, or who else falls into the category of mentor for you?
Well, John Bauma, on any scale, falls in a category by himself. He was one of the generation before me's most giant lawyers. He was one of the best lawyers you could ever hire, and at the same time, he helped to change our city and our state. And he was renowned at the national level as one of the leaders of the organized bar, and on and on. He was truly a giant. And we lost him 4 days before he was to place my name in nomination to be president of the ABA. I miss him every day. And I honestly ask myself, not infrequently, what would John do at this decision point? Because the things he taught me are the things that help me to make the hard decisions. That said, I have been blessed with all sorts of mentors over the course of my career. And when I talk to young lawyers, I remind them that you ought to take the mentoring in big scoops and small scoops from anyone who will spend time to help you. I mean, one of the reasons why I asked Mary Schroeder to swear me in was because she's been a mentor for me. I mentioned the mentoring that I've received from the other women and a number of men who have served as president of the American Bar Association. I'm blessed by a long list, and each of us, when we are successful, it's a consequence of lots of people who have helped us to get where we are. And I do my best to try and give it back, pay it forward, however you want to express it, to other people. But that's one of the cool things, I think, about the legal profession, is that we do mentor each other. We do look after each other. We do take the time to help raise up the next generation of professionals.
Wow, that's beautiful, Trish. That's all I've got. Any other closing remarks for the attorneys of Arizona or America?
You know, I'm going to go back to the be a change agent moment. In your small way, in your big way, each one of us has the chance to come out of this pandemic in a mindset that says we're going to do better. with what we have at the other end of this than we did going in. And I'm not saying we weren't good going in, but we've learned so much, and we are continuing to learn so much in this pandemic about how we can do better. Let's put it to work.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Trish. And thank you for all that you and the ABA do. And thank you to everyone who stopped by our conversation today. Be well.
Thanks, Tim.